Thank you. We are going to talk about Iran and Afghanistan in Indian context. Obviously, this is a subject of geopolitics. And so we should first understand what geopolitics is and what it is not. It can have many definitions, but for our present purpose, let's presume that it's a combination of geography and politics. And there is no geography without a huge history behind it. Geography is created by history. So politics becomes a function of geography, which is a function of history. So whenever you study geopolitics, start with history. You will come to wrong conclusions if you study geopolitics without knowing the history. And keep a map of the area before you, geography. So without these two things, a proper appreciation of geopolitics is not possible. The second thing is that as humans, we are supposed to be moral humans. An immoral human is not considered a good person because it is in his long-term interest to be moral. He may have short-term advantage by behaving immorally, but then society starts discarding him and he suffers long-term loss. So when we look at geopolitical issues, there is a natural tendency to apply this individual and social morality to countries also. And there we make a mistake. Geopolitics is not about morality. So this is one thing we should keep out of geopolitical considerations. We deal with devils. You know what Taliban one regime was. They used to shoot people in a big square and people used to stand around and clap when that person was killed. They used to cut hands of the people. They used to bury women up to here in the ground and then stone them to death. And we dealt with them. Because when our aeroplane was taken to Kandahar, we talked to them. We sought their cooperation. And we got our people released. So, China is an evil regime. They take organs from living prisoners. I'm not saying a very high-powered tribunal in London looked into this issue, examined thousands of witnesses, thereafter gave a fat report and confirmed that organs were being extracted from living prisoners. And we deal with China. We talk to them. Our Prime Minister meets Xi Jinping. We trade with them. So, in real life, if you know that a person has just now killed someone in cold blood, you may not like to talk to him. Your morality will not allow. There is only one morality in international relations, and that is your national interest. Just one morality. And just one means to achieve that morality. That is your national strength. If you are strong, you are moral in international relations. And the biggest immorality in international relations is to be weak. There is no bigger sin bigger immorality in international relations than to be weak. Now, this may look like immorality, but that is why I forewarned you that keep the individual and social morality out of international relations. Otherwise, you come to wrong conclusions. People see something, so and so attacked so and so, bahut bura kiya, bahut bura kiya. Now, this is application of individual and social morality. See what was his national interest. See what is the impact of his actions on our national interests, and then come to a conclusion whether it was good or bad. If it hurts our national interest, it is certainly bad. So, if he had an alternative of achieving his national interest without that, then maybe it will be bad, but not from the point of view of our morality. So, coming back to Afghanistan and Iran, we'll first look into history of both the countries, then why we are talking of the two countries together and not any other country, why I have taken Afghanistan and Iran. So is there any overlap between these two countries that they have to be studied together? And then we'll come to what is important about these countries from the point of view of India's national interest. Sorry, I think you said, okay, it'll come now. So just a map. I had to pick up this copyrighted map because most of the maps that you have on internet, they don't show. It's not working? It's working, it's okay. So most of the maps on the internet do not show full Kashmir as part of India. They truncate the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and this Aksai Chin part occupied by China. And so I had to use this Shutterstock image. So I think I'll come here, it will be better. So you can see that we do not have border with either Afghanistan or Iran. And still they are more important for us than any neighbor would be. And we'll slowly come to these issues. Now, India, we used to say that we have a long maritime border on the sea, and the mountains guard us from invasions. That's only partly true. These mountains are always porous. All mountains have passes. I'm very fond of roaming in the mountains, and I've crossed a whole lot of high passes on foot and driving over them. Even now I do it. So there were these trade routes. These passes all become trade routes. When one civilization met another civilization, it was never for the purpose of, initially, for the purpose of converting to religion or soft power or anything. It was trade. Subsequently, these things come, religion comes, trade. Even Muslims came here as traders originally. Europeans came here as traders. We went to Southeast Asia as traders, and all our northern routes were trade routes primarily. The Silk Road was a trade route also. So we had this northern route called Uttar Path. Don't call it Uttarapath. We have this problem in India that following the Europeans, we add an A to Ashok and Buddha and Krishna. So Krishna becomes Krishna, which is a feminine name, not a masculine name. So you don't add this A. There's a difference between the two scripts. Hindi script has a short vowel built into the consonant, while the Roman script does not have. So they have to add an A. We don't. When we write Buddha, there is no A there. So it is Buddha, not Buddha. So we had this Uttar Path. It connected West Bengal to Takshila, which is now in Pakistan, and further on to Bactria in Central Asia. And subsequently, Shesha Suri developed part of it as the Grand Trunk Road. But this was originally our Uttar Path, which finds mention repeatedly in our scriptures. Buddhist texts mentioned Mahajanpads, which many of them were in Afghanistan. And Mahabharat, not Mahabharata, again, Mahabharat. Nishantipar refers to Uttar Path linking the Gangetic regions to Kamboj, Gandhar, and Yavan countries. These were the Afghanistan and further northern areas in Tajikistan and beyond. It was a very important trade link between eastern India, and we used to send a lot of products. Our main import from there was very good horses, because that northern regions, the Central Asian regions, they have even today they have very good breed of horses, and they're very good riders. In fact, I was seeing yesterday something where they said we put a 4-year-old boy on a horse, and by the age of 5 he's a good rider. Names Kaushal, Kashi, Magad, Pragjyotish. Pragjyotish was Assam. So all these areas used to trade since time immemorial. We don't know when it started. There is no history telling us that it started at that time. And perhaps it did not start on any given day. It was an organic evolution, like the seed becomes a tree. So it was an organic evolution of this, and it continued from Dwarka, Dwaravati, to Sri Lanka. That was maritime part. By sea, it used to go. So this country was very busy in trade. And in fact, I wrote a paper on the identity between a tribe called Panis in Rigved and the Phoenicians of the Mediterranean. And I showed a lot of identity between the two. Our Panis were traders, and they say the word Pani led to Vanik, and so the trader. And but simultaneously, these Panis were very good carpenters. They were the Rigved says that they were Takshan work, the woodwork. So, and one of their characters is Takshak. So from Takshan. So the Phoenicians were also the best carpenters of that area, Mediterranean. They were the best shipbuilders, and our Panis were the best shipbuilders. And our ships were so popular in Egypt and Mesopotamia. They were made for a very good quality of teak wood. That when the ship outlived its life, they kept the ship and used that wood. And this is not hearsay, because in some of the temples, ancient temples where pieces of wood have survived, the genetic analysis has shown that this is Indian teak. So Indian teak has been found there. So we have been trading all along by land and by sea. The Mauryan Empire, they included parts of Afghanistan, and Hinduism and Buddhism spread there further during that time. Then when the Shak came, they also adopted Buddhism here, and people like Kanishk, and they spread Buddhism further. And it's all recorded. The Iranian traveler written says that Kabul was inhabited by people of Hind. Now this word I'll show it later, but I can talk about it now. The word Hind is actually a gift from the Persian people to us. The word was Sindh. The river is Sindh, and that determined our national identity. But the Persian people cannot pronounce Sa. Instead of Sa, they say Ha. For example, we have Saraswati River, and in Afghanistan there is in Iran there is a river which obviously was Saraswati, because there are many Saraswatis in India also. So any river which ought to be given respect was named Saraswati, because Saraswati was so well entrenched in Rig Veda. There is a whole hymn to river Saraswati in Rig Veda where it is called Devi Tame, Nadi Tame. So best of rivers, best of mothers. So this Iranian river Saraswati, they called Harhati because they couldn't say Sa. So Saraswati in Iran is Harhati. So Sindh in Iran became Hind, and that became our identity. So it's actually a gift from Iran to us. Then the Islamic invasions came, and Afghanistan was converted to Iran. Islam, and Iran was also converted. Now, this is a very interesting area in Afghanistan. It was called Kafiristan, because while whole of Afghanistan became Muslim, this little area refused. They held on to their own. So they were called Kafirs. We don't know what they called themselves. We know that the Muslims called them Kafirs. And so the area was called Kafiristan. Britishers have been calling them Siaposh because they wore black clothes. So they used to wear black gowns, and so they were called Siaposh. Why I am saying Britishers? Because this survived till 1895, just 120 years ago. They were still there. And that was a kind of Hindu religion. It was a variation. They had idols and other things. And some elements of Vedic culture are also found there. But in 1895, finally, the ruler of Afghanistan had a massive assault on them. All the adult male population was killed. Women were taken into slavery. And the children were all taken to madrasas in Kabul and heavily indoctrinated. And it is these converted Kafirs which are the foundation of Islamic fundamentalism in Afghanistan today. There is a universal fact that a convert is more fundamentalist than the original, always. And it is these converted people which have made Afghans Pashtuns only in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is two different sects, but 50-50, roughly 50-50. Half are Shias, half are Sunnis. These were Sunnis, the regulator was Sunni. So those all children have been converted to Sunni Islam. The northern part of Afghanistan and a little bit of southern part which borders Iran, they are Shias. And there is a difference in approach between Sunnis and Shias. We'll come to that. So after converting, they changed the name of that place, which is now in the map. In the map, you will not find Kafiristan now, though there is a Wikipedia entry on Kafiristan. Now it is called Nuristan. Nur is light. So they say light of Islam has reached there, so now it is Nuristan. Oh, yeah. So there is, in the neighboring area, which is now Pakistan, there were these Kalash people. They survived because this area was controlled by the British. So in 1895, the Afghan ruler could not convert these people. So the Kalash are still Kalash today, though now at present in Pakistan they are under a lot of pressure for conversion. They are holding on. Till today they are holding on. We don't know what will happen in the future. Their religion, identity, culture is totally different from Pakistan's Muslims. and their clothes and everything, and their racially they look to be different. Most of them have blue or green eyes, and, but they are surviving. Kalash culture, it's sometimes called Kailash also. So both names are used, Kalash or Kailash, either is used. So this is Afghanistan, and that dark green is the Kafiristan area, and then next is Pakistan on that side. It should have been Kashmir, but it's occupied area. We have been engaging with all the regimes of Afghanistan. We engaged with the Shah, and Shah was of course a very liberal Muslim, I would say, because he in fact annoyed the clerics, the mullahs. They were very annoyed with him because he promoted the idea of education for women, vote for women, giving equal rights to women in marriage, and the clerics were very, very unhappy with him. But when partition of India was there, we supported the Pashtuns. Now you have to understand that what you see on the map as the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan, that's called Durand Line, is a line drawn by the British. There was no natural border in that area. The British drew a line. And that line went through the heart of Pashtun territory. Half the Pashtuns fell on Pakistan side, more than half, in fact. If you see Pashtuns only, there are 4 crore Pashtuns in Pakistan and 2 crore Pashtuns in Afghanistan. So 2/3 actually fell on Pakistan side and 1/3 fell on Afghanistan side. And that's the problem now, which is happening in that area. Then we established diplomatic relations with them, had a treaty of friendship. When Russia moved into Soviet USSR, moved into Afghanistan, we were the first to recognize the regime, the puppet regime that they established there. Now, if you judge it from moral angle, why should we recognize a puppet regime? But then that serves our national interest, and so we did it. Then, when Taliban 1 came, there was a lot of hostility between Shias and Sunnis. The Northern Alliance was of Shias. The Tajiks, Hajaras, all those people were in the north. And Sunnis were in the middle, around Kabul. And there was a lot of hostility between them. At that time, initially, we supported the Northern Alliance. We had a little hope that Northern Alliance may prevail because America was also supporting the Northern Alliance. And to some extent, even Russia was sympathetic because Russia had been beaten by the Pashtuns. And Russians had that thing in their mind that if somebody can beat Pashtun, enemy of enemy's friend, we'll support him. So Northern Alliance had a lot of support. And people thought, including Indians, that it may prevail finally, so they were building bridges with them. But what happened is that Northern Alliance, what people did not realize perhaps, that they were not unified. There were many warlords there. So even today, Northern Alliance is still surviving underground, and there are too many warlords to overawe the Taliban. So we supported them, but simultaneously we had a lot of problems there. There were car bombs. Now, see this, Taliban were in power. So who was doing these car bombs? Not the Taliban. They will not blow up their own embassy. It was an emergent ISIS. The Islamic State was already emerging, and they were creating problems for Taliban. That Taliban should join hands with us. And Taliban did not join hands with them. Even today, after Taliban too came in power, the Islamic State had several bomb blasts in Afghanistan. And they are not joining hands with them. So all this trouble was created. Subsequently, USA came and Karzai was put up as president. And now you see that Karzai called India a great threat. In Pakistan, a twin brother. See how in diplomacy, every word matters. A single word can destroy a country. I'll digress from this. In Bangladesh, the agitation was against a reservation, which was given to descendants of freedom fighters. One day Sheikh Hasina carelessly uttered one sentence in which one word changed the whole thing. She said, if we'll not give reservation to freedom fighters, will we give it to Razakars? She used the word Razakar. Razakar in Bangladesh was used for Pakistan sympathizers, the Muslim fundamentalists. That evening itself, all the demonstrators had one slogan, including some in Delhi. We had sympathizers in Delhi also, some students. They were saying, Ami ke Razakar, tumi ke Razakar. Who am I, Razakar? Who are you, Razakar? We are all Razakars. And the goal of the demonstration shifted from reservation to removing Sheikh Hasina and making it Bangladesh an Islamic country. One word changed the course of events completely. If she had not said that, I think the trend could have been reversed at that time. So when he says twin brother, you know how brothers fight over father's property. What is India and Pakistan? Twin brothers, born at the same time from the same mother, and how they are fighting. So, very careful use of the word. He clarified. He said it has not yielded the results which we desired. India was a great trade. So, two countries, Iran and Afghanistan, both fundamentalists, one Shia fundamentalist, one Sunni fundamentalist. We are engaging with both. We are dealing with the devil because it serves our interest. And then get a praise from there. We gave them attack helicopters. Our Prime Minister went to Kabul we built the Parliament building for Afghanistan. Our Prime Minister inaugurated the Parliament building and said, a enduring symbol of ties of emotions and values, of affection and aspiration that bind us in a special relationship. This is what diplomacy has to do. You know, somebody said, a diplomat is one who lies abroad for the good of his country. Lies has both the meanings. He lies there, he lives there, and he lies there, he tells lies morning till evening. Now, is telling lies a good morality? Our diplomats, everybody's diplomats lie from morning till evening. Is it good morality in individual and social life? So just detach. Detach your mind from that moral frame and come to international moral frame. National interest, national strength. That is the only morality. We built a dam there. And we have $3 to $4 billion worth of investment in Afghanistan during that period when US supported puppet government was there. So first Russian puppet government was there, then US puppet government was there. And can we just write it off? Now when Taliban too came, people would have said, "Arey arey, bekar aadmi phir aa gayi hai, छोड़ो इनसे बात नहीं करनी." $3 to $4 billion there. You want to capitalize on that. You want to gain some advantage. Not that we want interest on that or that money back. It's not a loan. It's a gift, state gift. Not like China's BRI. China's BRI are all loans. We didn't give loans. So it's a gift. But in international relations, everything should have a payoff. And we want a payoff. So we will not forget about it. We have kept giving them aid. Initially, there was a serious food crisis when Taliban too came, and we gave them a lot of meat, and that earned us a lot of goodwill there. Now, Pakistan did it the other way around. In fact, Pakistan's foreign minister was the first one to visit Taliban too. And Pakistani TV kept saying, he had a cup of tea with them, and we are great friends, and brother Muslims, and this and that. And what they forgot, what not only there are 4 crore Pashtuns in Pakistan, there were a whole lot of refugees from those 2 crores also, which were across the border. A lot of them had come as refugees. And Pakistan, because there were some incidents here and there, small incidents, so it ordered that all the refugees have to go back to Pakistan, Afghanistan. That created a serious problem. And TTP, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, which was already there, it became very strong. The moment order was given for refugees to go back, TTP became very powerful. Many of the refugees joined the ranks of TTP. And the Taliban in Afghanistan were very unhappy with Pakistan, and they said, okay, we'll give them some weapons and teach you a lesson. So if brother Muslim country is having problems, and Kafir India is friends. And this is what happens. So in 1895, they attacked a small Hindu-like community and destroyed it. And now they are dealing, 130 years later, they are dealing with 100 crores Hindus here in India. Our foreign minister met Muttaqi in Dubai. You know, you all know about Muttaqi coming to India and being a great friend with us. But somebody had laid down the groundwork for that. The foreign secretary had met him in Dubai and exchanged ideas, what all we can do for you. And why we will do all this for you? Because now we have a common enemy. See, now the time has come in 2025, that Taliban too in Afghanistan and India have a common enemy in between. And the worst position for any country is to be sandwiched between 2 enemies. They can't be worse than that. You have no escape route. You have your back to the wall. Not even wall. You have your back to the enemy. And back to the enemy means you're shot in the back. So this is what we did when Taliban too came, and I think did it very successfully. So our finance minister says Pakistan is a shared threat. Again, carefully. Threat to you, threat to me. And let's take care of that threat. So Muttaqi has offered many things, mineral, agriculture, sports, of course. Afghanistani cricket team has been doing well in sports for a small country. And we have not yet recognized. We are doing all this and we don't recognize them. So China is the only country which has recognized Taliban too as a formal government. Nobody else has done that. So doesn't it look very odd? You don't recognize a country. And then their foreign minister comes here and stays for 4 days and everybody goes gaga about him. And Pakistan is beating its head every day You should have seen what was happening on Pakistani channels when Muttaqi was in India. They were crying, they were virtually crying. And some of them did say, it is nothing but preparation for attack on Pakistan. That as soon as Muttaqi goes back, attacks on Pakistan will start. Some of the Pakistani channels said at that time, they understood what is going on. As it happened, while Muttaqi was in India, the attacks came. During his stay in India, the TTP attacked Pakistan. Major attacks were there. So they have openly declared, we don't recognize Durand Line. And so wherever Pashtuns live, that is Afghanistan. This is like Putin, you know. Putin has declared this. Wherever Russians are there, that's our sphere of influence. So nobody else will come there. So his problem in Ukraine is that many Russians are there. So Donbass is virtually entire Russian, so Donbass has to come to me. So Central Asia has a lot of Russians, so Central Asian countries have to be bound tightly with Russia. So this is a philosophy many countries follow. Someday India will also follow. That wherever Hindus are there, that's our sphere of influence, why not? So, I mean, nobody can say it's bad or good or what. If it's in national interest, increases your national strength, it's good. Nothing else will apply. So I told you already that there are 4 crores in Pakistan and 2 crores in Afghanistan. And it's a long belt. The Afghanistan eastern border is divided between 2 countries, basically, Pakistan and Iran. And the border with Pakistan entirely has this Pashtun belt, the KPK, this Pashtun belt. Now, why we rushed in 24 and 25 to become friends with them, and not in the previous 2 years, you know. America ran away in 21, and 2 years we were by and large silent on the issue. Then we noticed that Afghan fighters are coming with the Pakistani fighters in Kashmir area. And it was found that the whole lot of weapons that USA had left there in Bagram base, some of those weapons were with the Afghan fighters. When they were killed, we found some of the US weapons and we could identify that it was part of that stock. Now that's a very dangerous thing because Pakistanis are not so good fighters. Afghans are much better fighters. Afghans have never been defeated by anyone in war. They have defeated, in a way, Britain. They have defeated Russia. They have defeated America. So 3 countries who were powerful at the given time, they defeated. So our foreign ministry, defense ministry were worried on this score that Afghan fighters coming with American weapons will be very dangerous for us. So they started building bridges very quickly. And after 23, we haven't had appearance of any Afghan fighters or any American weapons in Kashmir. They've not come. Our understanding now is very good. You know, in public space, after a meeting, whatever they may announce, but inside, a lot of judgment goes on. We had cold doors. And I'm sure Indian foreign officers have told them very clearly that this is our bottom line. We don't want to see one Afghan, one weapon from America in Kashmir. And after that, it is because $3 to $4 billion and so many other things. So, we have talked about it. Pakistan is being squeezed from both sides, and more so from Afghanistan side. In fact, the friend we have found on that side now has a higher hatred for Pakistan than we have. They actually committed to destroy now Pakistan because there are 2 insurgencies going on, Balochistan, the Balochistan Liberation Front and KPK of Pashtuns. Balochistan is not so much supported by Iran. it has a border with Iran. Balochistan has main border with Iran. And why Iran does not support Balochistan is that Iran also has a province called Balochistan. So if Balochistan becomes free, that province of Iran could also become free. So you would never have read in the newspapers any help coming to Baloch fighters from Iran. Any help that goes might be going from India, not from Iran, because they are worried about that. Simultaneously, the Iranians being Shia and Afghan regime being Sunni regime, they don't like them. So they are not supporting Pakistan's Balochistan's freedom fight. They are not hindering it also. You know, they are playing a balancing game. We have not found anything that Iran would have done to stop the insurgency in Balochistan. They haven't. They have not helped, but they have not done anything to stop also. Simultaneously, Baloch fighters who are chased by Pakistani forces, they find refuge in Iran's Balochistan. They are the same people, culturally, everything, food, and language also is similar on both sides. So when something becomes very hot for a Baloch terrorist or militant or freedom fighter, depending on which side you are, he goes to Iran's Balochistan. And Iran's Balochistan, you will remember in another context. You have heard the name of Kulbhushan Kharbanda. Yes. Pakistan's allegation is that he entered Pakistan from Iran. So you can put two and two together and see the game. So the net effect of our diplomacy is that Pakistan's army is very demoralized. They are finding it so difficult to move around in Balochistan and KPK because any passing vehicle has a car bomb and it destroys the Pakistani vehicle. In one incident, 15 to 20 people, they in fact targeted buses carrying Pakistani soldiers. So in one bus there are 40 soldiers, most of them dying when such a blast is there. And their economy is obviously in a bad shape because of their own things. They are helping both India and Afghanistan by being foolish about their economy, and they keep making strange statements. 2 days ago, Pakistan's foreign minister said our problems are solved, economic problems are solved. Our JF-17 planes, you know, China has put up a factory in Pakistan making JF-17 planes, fighter planes. That's a 4.5 generation fighter, little ahead of 4th generation. So Pakistan foreign minister said the word he used actually, they're selling like hotcakes. Everybody wants them. And first they have offered a few to Bangladesh. Then he said Saudi Arabia wants to buy 40 of them. And so much money will come to Pakistan now. We won't depend, he said we will not depend on IMF now. So much money will come to us. And next day, Reuters news agency brought out a news that it was all fake. No orders, nothing, absolutely nothing. So, Pakistan is doing its own job of destroying itself, and we are helping from both sides. Then we hit these terrorist places deep into Pakistan, right up to Rawalpindi. The people were demoralized. Whatever narration Pakistan may be spinning, and whatever silence Government of India may be maintaining, they say X number of our planes have been destroyed, Government of India keeps silence on that. But people in Pakistan have seen the truth with their own eyes. They have seen the bases being destroyed. When Noor Khan is their most prestigious air base. It had the most advanced air defense systems. Perhaps some Americans are also based there. American equipment is definitely there. If we can attack Noor Khan without interception on the way, it's a long way, there's enough time for interception. It does two things. It demoralizes the entire area. That's the capital area. It's very close to Islamabad and Rawalpindi. And it proved that the Chinese air defenses are no good. All along from border up to Noor Khan, there were Chinese air defenses. They could intercept our missiles. Not one plane was sent by India. Our planes did not cross the border at all. No single plane crossed the border. It was only missiles. And they could not be intercepted. So, the demoralization, in a country spreads very soon. And demoralization has reached POK now. Now, POK, you will understand, is two parts. There is one which is called Azad Kashmir by Pakistan. It's a very small part. It's a very tiny part. In fact, we think that entire POK is Azad Kashmir. No. Azad Kashmir is a very small part of POK, which has its flag and president and prime minister and constitution and national anthem and everything, and is totally controlled by Pakistan. The second part, which is the larger part, is called Gilgit-Baltistan. That is Shia. Gilgit-Baltistan is not Sunni. Pakistan establishment from Punjab basically is predominantly Sunni. Gilgit-Baltistan is Shia, virtually entirely. Kargil was a part of Gilgit-Baltistan before partition. Kargil is also entirely Shia. Kashmir Valley is Sunni. When you study geopolitics of Muslim nations, never let the idea of Shia-Sunni divide go away from your mind. You will be misled. This is a very important factor. So, Kargil and Kashmir Valley have no sympathy with each other. We never found Kargil terrorists in Kashmir. They may have come from Afghanistan, but not from Kargil. It's just Zozila in between, Zozila Pass. They could have also come. They'll never join. But they're Shia. And their sympathies are with people of Gilgit-Baltistan. So when this demoralization took place, Indian flags were raised in Gilgit-Baltistan. Actually, people raised Indian flags. They shouted for Modi. They said, we want to join India. These slogans were actually raised in that time. It's not close by, I would say, in terms of time. It will take time. But it's making our job easier. The day we want to liberate POK, leave aside Azad Kashmir part, but Gilgit-Baltistan is being prepared as a soft ground. It will be much easier. And why Gilgit-Baltistan is important, we'll come to it. It's very important for us. Azad Kashmir we can even ignore for some time, but Gilgit-Baltistan is geopolitically very, very important for us, and that's why we are boosting the moral breakdown in that area. So now we come to Iran. We have seen the history and relations. This is how geopolitics has to go about. You have to start with the background, and then you will automatically come to the right conclusion. Otherwise, if you just scratch the current surface, you will come to wrong conclusions. We have old relations, like Indus Valley artifacts were found in Afghanistan, they were found in Iran also. We have been trading with West Asia through Gulf of Hormuz even in ancient times. Uh, the Persian Emperor Darius, he had incorporated parts of even Punjab, not only Sindh and Gandhar as satrapies. And the Kharoshti script came from that side. This is one script which, like Arabic, Persian and Urdu, it's written from right to left. Kharoshti is an Indian script which is written from right to left. So what we call Mughal architecture is a fusion of India and Persia, the architecture of India and Persia. That produced Mughal architecture. If you go to where Babur came from, there is no Mughal architecture. It's a generation in India. It was created as a fusion in India. You can go to Uzbekistan someday and see how their ancient buildings are different from what we call Mughal architecture. So the Persian Empire was a great empire. I'm talking of the pre-Islamic Persian Empire. And perhaps in terms of extent, it was the largest empire in ancient times. There has never been a bigger empire. Entire Central Asia was part of it. Parts of West Asia were there. And Afghanistan was included in it. They were Zoroastrians. Persians at that time in Persian Empire were Zoroastrians. So when Islam came and they were attacked, Persia was called Faras. Persia, it's an anglicized word. The original word is Faras. And people were called Farsi. Even the language today is called Farsi. Persian language is called Farsi. It was such a big culture. That anyone who knows Persian is educated. One who doesn't know Persian is not educated. So when these people, some of them escaped and came to India, they were called Parsis. So the Parsis in India are the Zoroastrians who escaped Islamization in Iran, came by boats to the Gujarat coast, were given shelter and refuge by the king in Gujarat, that area. And it's a very interesting story. They came, they were heavily armed, they were Persian warriors, were famous, heavily armed Persian warriors, got off the boat and went to the king and said, we want refuge here. He said, fine, India gives refuge to everyone. You never refused to anyone. But he put 3 conditions on them. He said, you will speak in Gujarati language. Number 1, because if you keep speaking your language, you will not become part of our society. You will remain a separate enclave somewhere. So for assimilation, give up your language and start speaking Gujarati language. Number 2, the attire your women are wearing is not acceptable in India. So they will wear saris. Your women will wear saris. Men can keep wearing what they like, women will wear saris. And so you see Parsis, all Parsi women wear saris. And third, he said, you will not carry arms. You will give up your arms, because then there could be conflict. किसी ने गाली दे दी, तुमने तलवार निकाल के सिर काट दिया, फिर गड़बड़ हो जाएगी. So they accepted all 3 conditions, and they've been following that till this day. They speak in Gujarati, Parsis speak in Gujarati. Their women wear saris, and they don't carry arms. Of course, General Manekshaw did join the army and became field marshal. So that's an exception. But by and large, Parsis went into trade. They became traders. Sufism in India is a Persian influence, because Sufism is acceptable in Shia Islam, but is not acceptable in Sunni Islam. So in Sunni Islam, the paying obeisance to a dead person is not permitted. It's not permitted. Muhammad himself said that you should not pay obeisance at my grave, though people do. But in fundamental Sunni Islam, obeisance to a dead person is not permitted. So all these Peer Bazaars and everything, this is Sufis and Qawwalis and all that, this is an influence of Persia on India. And of course, I've talked about Sindh to Hind and Sindhi to Hindu. This transition has come from Persia. Many words we have adopted. We may not even think they are Persian words. They are rang, sabzi, kitab, maize. These are all Persian words which we have adopted in our Hindustani language. When the British came here, तो वो अभी पढ़े फारसी बेचे तेल अभी भी था. So they said, okay, we'll adopt Persian. And our courts, royal courts, mainly Muslim courts, they were all using Persian as court language. Persian was in India what French was in Europe. In Europe, everybody felt proud in speaking in French in those days. In fact, Tolstoy once mentioned that in Russia, we spoke in French, we wrote in French, we thought in French. So the same status was of Persian in India. People who wrote in Persian, thought in Persian, they were educated. So British also adopted it. And the revenue records which Todormal had created in Akbar's time in Punjab, Haryana area, they were all in Persian. So they adopted it, but later on, because the number of Persian speakers became smaller and smaller, so then they shifted to Urdu. So at independence, most of our revenue record in this area was written in Urdu language. When after joining the service, I was going through the old record. It was all in Urdu. And the terms were, even during our training, the terms were taught like that. For example, there is a thing in every village called village administration paper in English, where all the conditions which villagers have to follow are written. So it was called Sharayat Wajibul Arz. So he studied it as Sharayat Wajibul Arz only, not as village administration paper. So we continue to read it. Now, the conversion of Iran to Islam was in two stages. Originally it was Sunni Islam. Then came Shia Islam. Sunni Islam came with violence, but the violence which Shias inflicted on Sunni Iranians is unimaginable. You can find it all on Wikipedia. People were given just three choices: convert to Shia, leave Iran, or get killed. There were just three choices. And they say in India also sometimes this is there, but the way it was carried on Iran, that virtually entire Iran became Shia there. And those who did not, they were killed. Now, this produced a very unintended effect. The conversion to Shia by force rekindled their desire for pre-Islamic Persian Empire. Now, pre-Islamic Persian Empire was religiously a very tolerant empire. How did Bamiyan Buddhas survive all these years in Afghanistan? How did so many Hindu temples and Gurdwaras survive in Iran? There are temples and Gurdwaras in Iran. The Persian Empire was very tolerant. And since these people suffered so much violence, they developed sympathy for that religious tolerance of the Persian Empire. And that continues till today. In fact, in the recent disturbances in Iran, some of the slogans are against Islam. People have heard slogans against Islam because they say this is making us religiously intolerant. So let's go to our pre-Islamic thing. In fact, they say Shah as a symbol, they say that it continues from pre-Islam. It doesn't. The Pahlavi dynasty started very late. But the Shah always claimed that I am a continuation from the old Persian, from Darius' time I am a continuation. Symbols matter. You know, for human beings, reality does not matter, symbols matter. So, the Iranian protesters are harking back to the pre-Persian, pre-Islamic Persian heritage of religious tolerance. So this is very interesting that we have this fundamentalist, rigid image of Iran, mullahs rule in Iran. And during that, not a single temple, not a single gurdwara has been vandalized in Iran. Not one religious place. In Afghanistan, they broke the Bamiyan Buddha in Taliban won. But in Iran, since 79 when Khomeini came, not one other non-Islamic religious place has been vandalized. So these are the things you have to notice to see what kind of policies we expect from the next regime. If this agitation succeeds, the next regime is more likely to be a secular regime. I've written an article 2 weeks ago that Maduro has been captured and now perhaps is the turn of Iran. I wrote that 2 weeks ago. And the next regime is likely to be a secular regime if it succeeds. We do not know. A lot of killings are going on. Hundreds of protesters have been killed. So we don't know whether it will succeed. Depends on whether external help comes or not. So the Shah was very tolerant. I have already told you that he gave a lot of rights to women, and the clerics hated him. In fact, that was one reason this Islamic revolution was there, because the Shah was not kowtowing to the mullahs, and that's the reason against him. So I mentioned that they have not displayed any intolerance towards other people. The regime keeps talking about destroy Israel, do this. Khomeini, the present supreme leader, has been talking about India doing things in Kashmir. But people are not against other religions at all. So I mentioned 19th century temples, Hindu temples in Iran, and there are some Sikh gurdwaras also. They're intact. They've not been attacked. Revolutions have come and revolutions have gone, but the temple and gurdwara are very much there. So we have carried on with all. With Khomeini, we had some tension when he said funny things about Kashmir, but gradually he realized that India and Iran have to synergize on Afghanistan, so for handling Afghanistan. And so some understanding developed, and then he allowed us to invest in Chabahar port, and then one terminal has been given to us for 10 years in Chabahar port, and that's again very important for us. This is another thing. You know, you keep going into history, keep going into social aspects. Khomeini's grandfather, Khomeini's, the previous one, Khomeini's grandfather was born in UP. And whatever it is, you know, you hark back to your ancestral village. You think, yeah, I belong to that place. You will never have gone. I've never gone to my ancestral village. But I have an image in my mind that my family belongs to that. So Khomeini did sometimes mention this Indian connection. So the enmity comes a notch down, little bit softening is there. These all factors are very important. Of course, Israel, for Israel, Iran has, Islamic Iran has only one slogan, destroy it. They just want to destroy it. And India is a friend for Israel. But in spite of that, both are dealing with the devil. They are dealing with the devil, which are us. We are dealing with the devil, which they are. And carrying on trade, Java port, and a lot of India's Shias. Some of the holiest shrines of Shias are in Iran. Only one is in Baghdad, the Karbala. That's also a Shia shrine. The rest are in Iran, holiest shrines. So Indian Shias have been going there on pilgrimage, and both countries have been facilitating that. Now this fellow, he was no friend of India. He was a firebrand, hardcore Islamist, but he had technically a stopover, and we made it an official visit, and talks were there. And then Manmohan Singh went to Tehran. So we've been engaging with the devil. Khomeini talked on Kashmir, but then there are common interests. Because you remember very recently, Iran and Pakistan had a hot skirmish. Artillery shells were fired by Pakistan on Iran, and Iran by Iran on Pakistan. So again, whether it is managing Afghanistan or managing Pakistan, those two managements are of different kinds, but Iran-Indian dialogue becomes very important. So now you understand that these two are not neighbors, but they are more important for us than the neighbor. So we have this 10-year contract, and America had sanctions that you will not do anything with Iran, but gave us a waiver for this. The waiver will end in 26. Let's see what happens in 26. By then, perhaps a new regime may come in Iran, and then it will continue. So this is what I told you, that a new regime is definitely going to be more friendly to India. So these are some of the items of overlap in the history of, I'll not dwell on it, most of the things we have discussed, but they have been in fact claiming, did I say that Ferdowsi, some claim he was Afghan, some claim he was Iranian. And, actually, the area where he was born, Ferdowsi was born, is today now in Afghanistan. At that time, it was in Persian Empire. So both countries claim that Ferdowsi is ours. So such overlaps do help. Such cultural overlaps do help. Both countries had the same name in ancient times, Haryana. Haryana or Haryana, whatever it was pronounced as at that time, we don't know. The word Iran came from that, the place of the Aryans. But irrespective of what some Europeans have done, converted Arya into a race, it's not a race. It relates to culture, language, and other traits of a society, certainly not racial, and it was not. Both being called Haryana did not mean there was racial identity between the Iranians and Afghanistan. But cultural and linguistic, Dari language, Persian are quite similar. Afghan's Dari language and Persian are quite similar. And interestingly, what used to be Persian capital is now in Afghanistan. Herat is now in Afghanistan. This we have mostly talked about the forcible conversion to Shia, and even the border between Afghanistan and Iran was created by the British. It's called this Helmand River border. And just now they're not fighting over it. Both parties are not happy about that water, but quite about it, because Pakistan has to be handled first, and then we will see what we have to do about it. So, we have to have a homogeneous foreign policy for Iran and Afghanistan. We cannot have separate, totally independent, separate foreign policies for these two countries. It has to have a lot of overlap. We have ideological differences. Neither of them is a democracy. We have other issues with fundamentalism, but the national objective today is to manage Pakistan, manage in the way on our terms, what we want to do with it. And gradually we have brought Afghanistan on the same page, and if there is a regime change in Iran, we'll bring Iran also on the same page. So, you know all this, Pakistan being hit from both sides, and how Pakistan is being led by these insurgencies. So, now we come to our national interest other than Pakistan. One is to manage Pakistan, but there is a very big national interest, and that is about connectivity. As I said in the beginning, the mountains were never an obstacle to trade, the passes were there, but gradually we lost all that. The passes which permitted trade, and we virtually became landlocked of that side. Except an opening in Nepal, we have no opening. Bangladesh was there, it's lost. For the moment, we don't know how it will develop. Pakistan was lost, China has a problem. So the only opening today we have is with Nepal for land trade. The rest is our maritime trade. Maritime trade, of course, we can keep doing. Now we want to open it up. And that opening up means that we need something there or something below. Either we need the Chabahar, so that from there we can go to the north, or we need something, the Wakhan corridor. I think I have a map somewhere. Or earlier, was it earlier? Anyway, I'll not waste time on that. So, if you see the map of Afghanistan, on the very north, there is a finger projecting towards the east, very thin finger projecting, till finally it touches a very small part of China. If Wakhan corridor is not there, China does not have a border with Afghanistan. And when all this great game was being played, China insisted that we should have a border with Afghanistan. And so this funny thing, it was Tajikistan territory. That land was actually Tajikistan. Tajikistan is next. So this little strip was created to connect Afghanistan to China. Now, just below that, on its southern border of Wakhan corridor, is Gilgit-Baltistan. Now, if we are able to liberate Gilgit-Baltistan, and we have good relations with Afghanistan, then we can drive from India to Tajikistan, Central Asia, Europe, wherever we want. So there are these two connectivities which we have in mind. One from Chabahar port and one from the Wakhan corridor. That depends on our taking over Gilgit-Baltistan, and this depends on our lease of the terminal continuing beyond 26. So, but that's the policy. We are working for that policy. So, why is Chabahar important? One is connectivity. The other is China's CPEC ends at Gwadar. The Pakistani port at Gwadar, that's where China's CPEC ends. And Chinese have an undeclared naval base there. They have made hidden facilities for submarines. So submarines can go underground through the sea and be hidden there and be safe from attack. And they have big ideas for Chabahar because Chinese have a base in Djibouti. And if they have a naval base at Chabahar, then the entire area is commanded by them. And obviously we don't like it. So Gwadar and Djibouti. So we have this Chabahar in between. अपनी टांग अड़ाने के लिए हमने वहाँ चाबार में किया है. Gradually we will like the camel and the tent story that camel said, okay, let me put my head and then put my neck and put my front two legs and so on. And finally the Arab was out of the tent. So gradually maybe we'll increase our presence in Chabahar and at least we can keep an eye. When we are sitting there, you don't know whether the officer sitting there is a trade officer or a naval officer. So we can keep an eye on the whole area. Now, this is another area. Gulf of Hormuz is above this, north of this. This is Gulf of India. Now, what has recently happened about this area? What was the most important news about this area recently?
Somaliland attacks on the ship.
What?
Houthi attacks on the ship. Houthi rebels.
Sir, Yemen rebels.
Israel recognized Somaliland. Somaliland has not been recognized by any country. It's a breakaway region of Somalia. It has its government, everything functioning, the economy is doing fairly well. Somalia objects to its recognition as an independent country. It has not been recognized by any country. Israel recently gave full diplomatic recognition to Somaliland. Now, this is where we keep an eye on second Gulf and Djibouti. Djibouti is next to Somaliland. Their Chinese are sitting. Americans are also there. Djibouti is a very funny country. It said all tenants are welcome. So you give us rent and make what you want. So every country has made a base there. America has made, France has made base. So many countries have made bases there. They just get their rent from. And they say, keep fighting among yourself, we are not bothered. So anyway, but Chinese presence there means that India should have some eye there also. Now with Israeli recognition of Somaliland and close cooperation just now between the militaries of India and Israel, we get an eye there. We keep an eye on that. That's very important. This recognition is very, very important for us. So this is what I've said here. So lastly, it's never a straight line. Geopolitics is very, very complicated. You start from history, look at geography, look at the religious equations, look at the social equations, look at the trade possibilities, look at the possibilities of alliances around it if some nation is not very amenable to friendship with us. And through that complicated path, then you utter your words carefully, whether you say twin brother or whether you say great friend, you have to be very careful. Thank you.